This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Hey, y'all. So we are at the end of the very first season of the podcast, and it's kind of amazing to be at this place. I'll be honest with you. When I started this project at the very end of last year, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had a rough idea of what I would be interviewing people on, and I had a handful of people that I wanted to interview, but above and beyond that, I really had no idea what it was going to be about. And so when I started, I just kind of jumped in. I'm a big believer in if you jump in, you'll figure out how to fly on the way down. And I take that approach on a lot of things. It has enabled me to be really successful in life, but it also means that I make some decent sized mistakes sometimes. But this has been an amazing experience. And one of the incredible things is that not only have we wrapped up our first season, but I have most of the second season already taped and a lot of it edited. So hopefully the second season will flow even more smoothly than this first one has. One of the great things about this, I timed it. I did it intentionally, but I timed it to go right up against a trip to Italy. So I'll be out of town for a couple of weeks, and the season ends right as I head out of town. And I did that for a couple of reasons, primarily because what I have found in Italy is that I never know exactly what the internet situation is going to be like. And in my last trip, every once in a while I would hit like a golden spot and have solid internet connectivity. But for the most part, I didn't. And so I did not want to be leaving you guys hanging when I couldn't get anything to upload, or if I couldn't get edits made, or whatever. I just wanted to go ahead and plan ahead for that. And so the great thing was we got our 10th episode in. This will be number 11, and that's the wrap for the first season. What I wanted to do to kind of summarize this past season is to go through the interviews that I had and give you a sense of what I took away from each one. And I'm curious to see if it's similar learnings for you guys, or if you took away something completely different. The very first one that I did, I called Standing in My Truth. And it was the one that I did on my own. And I wanted to just kind of set the tone for what interviews would be about. One of the biggest things that I found in these interviews was that if I came and brought my truth and was open and honest with my truth early on, people opened up much more readily. And it was great because it feels so good to be open and honest, especially about something you're scared to share. I was amazed at how freeing it was to just say that stuff out loud and know that people were going to be listening. If anyone has been watching this show, Baby Reindeer, and it's disturbing on so many levels, but one of the truths that he talks about that really hit home with me, he's this comedian that, if you've not watched it, he's this comedian that has all these things in his life that he's ashamed of, or that he's terrified for people to find out. And he goes up on stage one night and just totally melts down and ends up just saying everything, all the things that he's been terrified to share and terrified that people would learn out about him. He just puts it all out there. And at the end, he's like, he has this huge catharsis because he can't take it back. It's out there. Someone tapes it. It goes viral. He goes and he talks with his parents, and it turns out that he and his father were much more eye to eye on things than he realized, and that he had been harboring all these things and terrified to share all these things that were so human and that enabled other people to really relate with him and connect with him. And that's what I have found in this experience is that the more I talk about the things that I'm ashamed of or embarrassed to say out loud, the more it enables other people to say the things that they're ashamed of and embarrassed to say out loud. And usually the things that we are terrified to share aren't that scary. And people don't judge us the way that we expect them to. And so that standing in my truth was a hard one to tape, but it was so freeing when I hit that publish button and saw it was out there and started to get feedback on it. Um, it truly was just such a empowering moment, and I felt so powerful afterwards. And the challenge of getting to that place in the first place, learning how to podcast and learning how to edit and all the steps it took to get there, it was a big process. And so finally getting it published was just so empowering on so many different levels. The episode from prisoner to product manager was a fun one for me to do. Josh Hawley has a great story. He spent, if I remember correctly, 6 years in prison. And when he came out, he was kind of behind the eight ball. He wanted to do good things and big things with his career, but he wasn't sure where to go with that. And I loved his story because it truly is an example of if you own your truth and you put it out there and just focus on growth, amazing things can happen. He's a product manager now. He goes and he does public speaking. He is a huge, he runs a ton of races, and he's really big in helping to educate and empower kids. And so it's a great story of how even when you feel like you've screwed up and life has kind of taken your feet out from underneath you, you can always come back from that. And you're the one that chooses what your path looks like. The next interview that I published was 5 for Fostering Change, and that was with Rob Scheer. He is a phenomenal advocate for kids that are in foster care. And Rob came from the foster care system himself. He went through all kinds of abuse and setbacks and carried, similarly to my story, carried a lot of shame over it. And his interview was wonderful because he was one of the first people, before doing these interviews, he was one of the first people that I ever spoke with who just put all his crap out there. And I remember the first time I talked with him, we were working on an initiative, and he reached out and said, "Hey, look, I'm happy to help if you're interested." And so we just did a quick conversation just to see where we could line up and what kind of help we could get from him. But in that talk, he was just from the get-go so open and honest about his story. And it kind of took my breath away because here's this person who's super successful and he's articulate and he's well educated, and yet he owns his truth, and he does so unapologetically. And so I loved his interview because what he does is he looks for ways every single day to reach out to 5 people and try to foster change in their lives and to be an agent of change in life. And so I loved his interview because it was a great reminder that big change can happen from little bitty actions. The next one that I did was The Power of Dynamic Resilience, and that was with Sasha Scher. And that was a great one because Sasha has gone through so many setback after setback after setback. And yet she constantly brings the most amazingly powerful, dynamic, beautiful energy. And she's always empowering others. She is always looking for how to be bigger and bring better things to life. And I loved her interview because it was such a great reminder that challenge is going to come. Challenge happens. It is what it is. And the only thing that you can control with that is how you handle it, how you dust yourself off, and how you keep moving. And so I loved her interview. The one that we did after that was Growth Can Be Lonely with Jenna Levine Liu. And Jenna is an interesting one because she talks so openly about the challenges of being a mom in today's world. And it is tough. In social media, the amount of criticism and analysis that every single decision that you make gets is overwhelming. And likewise, what you will find is the more successful you become, often the less the people that know you will support you. But what she gets into in her interview is the fact that she expected friends and family to support her. And she helped me realize that a truth in my own life, which is often the people that support you the least are your friends and family. They're used to a set version of yourself, and that version of yourself fits into the world that they've created in the box that they've got for you. And when you start to grow, you no longer fit into that box. And that's huge. That's what growth is about. It's about growing outside of your set boundaries. But it's not a comfortable thing for other people to go through with you. And they either have to choose to grow with you, or they're going to land on the lay side a little bit as you grow outside of that boundary. And so growth is lonely. Growth is alienating, but it is so incredibly powerful. And it is wonderful to get to that next level and look back at where you've come from and how much you've gained from the process. And so I loved that takeaway from hers. We then did The Power of Psychedelics with Sarah Rambo. And Sarah is a great story of someone who also came from so much childhood trauma and took that and initially used it to foster just huge personal and professional growth. She was highly successful, but it wasn't feeding her soul. It wasn't feeding who she was on the inside. And so she scrapped it all. She sold her Louis Vuitton bags and used it to start a psilocybin company. And she now helps others follow that path of learning how to be the best versions of themselves and to open up to their true potential. And so it was a really cool interview with her to kind of look at alternative ways that you can go about helping to achieve personal growth. One of the next was The Beauty of Strength with my friend Olivia Nunn. And Olivia is amazing because she retired from the military and is open about how hard that was. And I don't think we often realize that those huge life changes are often catalysts for changes much, much bigger than just the fact that it's a career change. And so she talks openly about the amount of depression that it took her down into, the path that she went through to get through that, and most importantly, what she learned from it. And so it was a great interview. I love Olivia. She definitely brings like so much sass and perspective to anything she's talking about. So that was a fun one. Probably one of my most powerful ones was Strength Born from Solitude with Seraphin Leon. And this one was a really, really perspective shifting one for me because Seraphin did a long stay in prison for murder. But in that, he did 20 years in solitary confinement. And listening to what he learned from that experience blew me away. And it really, it is an interview that has sat with me since then. I keep coming back to it. And it is huge when things feel overwhelming or tough. I love going back to that interview and remembering that simple things like a piece of grass, the texture of it, the scent of it, the vibrancy of the green. It's such a gift that it's so easy to take totally for granted. But it's important that you slow down and that you focus on the beauty of the here and the now and in these moments. And so that was a wonderful interview that I loved because it was such a great reminder to be grateful for what you have. No matter what it is, be grateful for whatever this is that you have. We then the next interview was how to really help kids in foster care. And Rob sure came in and talked about the fact that it doesn't have to be huge things. Some of the easiest ways to help kids in foster care are free. And it's literally just being there for them, going and donating time, You can go and you can play baseball with them, basketball, whatever. It doesn't have to be turning your lives upside down to foster. It can be little things just to show kids that they've got a community. The final one from this season was creating music from pain with my friend from high school, Adrian Baranowski. And this one was a big one for me. It hit deep because I knew that in high school I was dealing with my own trauma and my own pain. But to hear from someone else who was going through similar trauma and pain, and to realize that the people around us, we assume that their lives are perfect. We assume that their lives are so completely different from our own. But the reality is that we are all dealing with something, and we're all carrying some load that we usually carry in silence. And so it's a great reminder to be kind and to step outside of your own self, to look around and to see who you can reach out to and who just needs a little bit extra kindness in the day. Because one of the things that was a consistent theme that I heard over and over and over again in these interviews, the thing that enabled people to elevate and to go on to that next level, to come out of whatever the bottom of the barrel that they're at and to elevate, is having people in their lives that support them and that care about them. And that can be family, that can be friends, that can just be a random stranger. But having people that see you and love you and support you makes all the difference in the world. When Serafine was talking about what motivated him to get an education and to reach back and to help educate kids once he got out of prison, it was having family and friends that came to see him even though he was in prison, and that saw him and that were waiting to see him succeed. Talking with Josh Hawley, it was a similar message. He said, when he got out of prison, it was amazing to have so many friends that were waiting there to support him. Over and over and over again, that was a message that I heard from people, which was, yes, you're going to lose people in the process, especially if you're doing major growth, you're going to lose people. But you're going to have those that stand by you, and to focus on those relationships. Focus on the ones that are rooting for you. Don't waste all of your energy on the ones that fall away and that aren't there for you, because they won't be there for you regardless. But focus on the ones that are there for you and that do support you. And this season has been amazing for me. Like I appreciate every single one of you that have come and have brought your perspectives and given your time for an interview. I appreciate every single one of you that's listened to the podcast and reached out with support and suggestions and tips. I cannot tell you how much I've appreciated that. And going forward, I know that we are on the cusp of major growth, and I can feel it, but more importantly, I can see it. I can see you guys, my numbers keep ticking up, and I appreciate it so much. I love being able to reach you guys and having you go with me through this process on this adventure, because that's what life is. It is just one big adventure. And I appreciate every single one of you that comes along and brings your love and your support. So thank you guys so much for an amazing first season. I am looking forward to sharing with you the second season, because we've got some amazing interviews coming up. And if you've got an idea for a podcast, or you have an interview you want to give, go to carolinesadventure.com. There is a box right on the landing page for suggesting a podcast. I'll reach back out to you and we'll set it up. But thank you guys so much. I have loved this process. I am so grateful you guys convinced me to start a podcast, because it has been one of the most fun experiences. It has been a huge learning experience, way outside of my comfort zone, but I've loved it. So thank you guys, sending you all the love. And here's to season 2. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.